Hi all, thank you for joining us this morning as we kick off our Saturday events for Family Weekend 2020. Today we have the privilege of hearing from Dr. Christine Whalen as she talks about life on purpose, 3 questions only you can answer. Dr. Whalen teaches classes on consuming happiness, belonging and purpose, and finance and families in the School of Human Ecology here at UW-Madison. She is the author of 4 applied research books and has been published in the New York Times, Washington Post, and US Today, among many others, and is a frequent guest on national and local TV and radio. As a student of Dr. Whalen's, I can guarantee that you will leave this talk feeling inspired and ready to take on your life with a new perspective. So without further ado, I present to you Dr. Christine Whalen.
Thank you so much, Brooke, for that fantastic introduction. It's so fun to have one of my students introduce me for this talk. So hello, everyone. It is great to be here. And as Brooke said, I'm Christine Whalen, and I teach in the School of Human Ecology at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. And today I want to talk to you about a concept that is near and dear to my heart, both in terms of my research, but also in terms of my everyday lived experience right now, and that of perhaps you, and definitely your students, which is this question of purpose and meaning, and how we do what's right, what's purposeful, what's meaningful in a time of uncertainty. So I want to begin with a little bit of, I can put it history in quotes, a little bit of modern history on the pandemic and purpose. So back in March, I was teaching my consuming happiness class. And as we headed into spring break, I realized that things were going to change. And I was on social media a lot, more than normal, following the news, but also noticing that my feed was full of advice about what to do in a time of uncertainty, what to do in a time of pandemic. So for example, I got this helpful little tidbit from the Washington Post that during a pandemic, Isaac Newton had to work from home too. And we know what he came up with. So, I mean, you know, we should really seize the day and work from home much better than we do. Then there was also the suggestion that in your time at home, in quarantine, you should work on your abs, that you should be fit, that you should be fabulous, that this was a really good time to embrace a new and better you. And then there was just the reminder that Shakespeare was quarantined because of the plague, and he wrote King Lear. So no pressure, right? Well, I immediately reacted against this because I study purpose and meaning, and I study the self-improvement industry. I study what it means to live the good life, what it means to be happy. And all of this advice was really making me unhappy. I felt a tremendous amount of pressure. And I thought, you know, first of all, this is certainly not a national shutdown for so many people, for parents, for essential workers, for folks who are doing manual work where they have to be in a particular place. So I said, okay, let's pull back and let's think about what is some good advice, what is some useful advice that we can offer to people in this pandemic that will help things be more meaningful. So over the last 8 months, this is what I have been focusing on. And today what I want to talk to you about is in this odd time, some of us are pushed by pain to make a change. Maybe we've lost a job. Maybe we are facing anxiety and depression. Bad things have happened in our families. Maybe we've lost a loved one to the virus or to some other illness. Others of us, though, in this time are pulled by the possibility of building a better world, building a better life for ourselves, reinventing ourselves during this time of change. So in our search for pandemic purpose, there are 3 questions that I want to sort of look at today briefly, and then take a lot of time for questions. So first, what's going on here? What is happening, and how can we frame this methodologically in a way that will be useful to us to think about it? What does purpose mean right now? And what can I do? What can you do today to make meaning in your everyday life? So my motto comes from Seneca. Not for school, but for life we learn. And this is my motto in teaching and, quite frankly, in my parenting as well. I have young children. I have a 5, 7, and 9-year-old. And I love the idea of not for school, but for life we learn, because my passion is applied education. So my passion is taking research and translating it into things that normal people can use in their everyday lives. And so that's really what I try to bring into the classroom. Now, I also come at this world and this work from a human ecological perspective. And human ecology is not a phrase that many of you may have heard of until you got involved with UW-Madison, perhaps, because not all schools are fortunate enough to have a school of human ecology like we do here. So the human ecological perspective is a really interdisciplinary perspective that looks at how we as individuals are interconnected with each other and with our natural, built, and social environments. So what this particularly means is that, no man or woman is an island. No student is an island. And in the School of Human Ecology, we're really about those interpersonal relationships. But we also take the approach that to be happy, to live a life of well-being, means to take an eco-you approach to the world, not an ego-you approach to the world. So if you're looking at the world through an ego approach, that's like me, me, me. I'm better than everybody else. I'm the top of the heap. And this tends to, in our heteronormative culture, tends to put men, particularly white men, above everybody else. We certainly put humans above animals and the environment, and it's sort of like a top-down structure that doesn't always work well for us, especially if we're not at the top of the heap. The human ecological perspective, but the ego-you perspective, what we see is that we are all interconnected and that the self is really interconnected and embedded in the whole. So it's not that we're better than anybody else or lesser than anybody else, but that we are all in relationship with everybody. And so what I encourage my students to look at is how their lives can move from an ego approach to an eco approach, to see their happiness and well-being as connected with others. So in this eco approach, this eco-you approach, it recognizes that you as an individual are embedded in a web of these ever-evolving connected networks. Now, that's really great for a lot of relationship building, but as evolutionary practices have it, it's also great for the spread of a virus. And so in the pandemic, we've had this interconnectedness really shaken, and we are trying to find new ways of connecting, like this one, and new ways of sharing meaning and building meaning for ourselves. So in this fall semester, and then in the second half of the spring semester, I guess last semester as well, this is what we were talking about a lot in my classes. But the other topic that we talk about a tremendous amount is the topic of purpose. And I want to really sort of delve into this a little bit, because this may be a question that you have had for yourself. Maybe you wake up at 3 in the morning like I do, saying, what's the point of all this? What is the meaning in life? Or perhaps you've had these conversations with your young adult children. So what is purpose? Now, purpose is one of those big words that is in the cultural zeitgeist right now. And it is also one of those words that's kind of like wishy-washy and overused because we don't really know how to define it in our own lives. Some people define purpose as the why behind everything you do, or your singular life aim, like your reason for being. While other people think of it as the reason why you get out of bed in the morning. And all of those are fine definitions of purpose, but I really try to be a little more specific with my students and in my own life. So I define purpose as using your gifts in keeping with your values to make a positive impact on the lives of others. So using your gifts, what you're good at, in keeping with your values, what matters to you, to make a positive impact in the lives of others in a pro-social, outward kind of way. And I also like to think about purpose through this wonderful story, this parable really, of a traveler who came across 3 men laying bricks. And the traveler asked the first man, "What are you doing?" And the first man said, "Well, I'm putting 1 brick on top of the other." And that was true. He asked the second man, and the second man said, "I'm building a wall." And that was true. He asked the third man, and the third man said, "I'm building a cathedral." And that was true too. Now, the first man had a job, the second man had a career, and the third man had a calling. He saw the larger why behind what he was doing. But what's interesting about this is that all 3 of those workers were doing the same thing. They were all putting 1 brick on top of the other. And that's what we do in our lives. And sometimes, like bricklaying, it's not particularly glamorous. It can often be very challenging work. It can be kind of exhausting and messy. And that's what we find. Anyway, what I find right now, especially now in this pandemic, life can be really hard. The bricks are heavy. And especially in my family life, it can seem really unglamorous a lot of the time. But if you take that third bricklayer's approach and you see the larger why behind what you are doing, then that can give us a sense of meaning, a sense of inspiration to keep on going and put one brick on top of the other. So my call to everyone is that we are all cathedral builders, not in the religious sense necessarily, but in the sense of building something pro-social for others that is greater than us, building a larger vision of a better future. So that's kind of how I define purpose. But still, you're saying, okay, that's great and inspiring, but what about the academics of this? That's a good story. How does it work? So turns out in the last 20 years or so, there has been a lot of research that looks at whether having a purpose in life makes you happier, whether it makes you healthier, how it can improve your life. And the way that the research explains purpose is that having a sense of life purpose, and by the way, that sense of life purpose is usually measured in a purpose in life inventory, a scale, an assessment, where you get a score for your purpose in life. And the higher your score, the more purpose you have, according to this research. And then what the researchers look at is, does somebody who has a higher purpose score, what happens to them? Do they have better outcomes in all sorts of different realms? So what the research finds is that people who have a sense of purpose in life tend to have a sense of increased agency. And agency is that feeling that you can do it, that feeling that you can make things happen. And when you have a feeling of agency, that tends to lead to more life satisfaction. You're happier. So purpose tends to be linked to all sorts of positive health outcomes, which is really important to us these days. If you have a sense of purpose, a higher purpose score on these inventories, you tend to get better sleep. You have fewer strokes and heart attacks. You have a lower risk of dementia and premature death. But it also tends to be linked to preventative health measures. So people who have a sense of purpose in life tend to be more likely to take care of themselves, to get a flu shot, get your flu shot, to get mammograms, to have lower levels of these pro-inflammatory gene expressions. So the idea is that having a purpose can actually have some real health benefits. Research also shows that having a higher sense of purpose makes you have better relationships. It helps you have less acrimonious relationships. It even helps you put more money in your pocket. You tend to earn more over a 10-year period than folks in your same career who feel like they don't have a sense of purpose. So purpose is a good thing. And my hope is that I've kind of sold you on the brief overview of the fact that research says purpose is a good thing. All right, so I'm going to assume that you're with me on that. And then, of course, your next question is, great, I want more purpose. Is purpose something that I can get? Can I strengthen my sense of purpose? And the answer is yes. So this is the good news, which is that purpose is not like an either you're born with it or you're not. Purpose is something that you can cultivate. Purpose is like a muscle. It is something that you can build and strengthen by thinking about it in new ways. So I have done a lot of research and applied work in the last 5 years, especially, and really more like 7 years as I wrote my recent book on purpose formation among young adults. But I've done a fair amount of research on how individuals can strengthen their sense of purpose, not in some like La La Land way of just the bricklayer parables and the idea of nice stories, but of practical steps that you can take. So that's what I want to talk about. And so I'm going to invite you to do a little bit of an exercise with me. Now, I will tell you that when I do this in class, I look at my students and I say, oh yes, for serious, I would like you to participate and play along with me. And they look at me and they say, really, do I have to? And I say, yes, you have to. And I promise there will be a payout. So I'm going to say the same thing to you. I would encourage you to write down these questions. You don't necessarily have to come up with the answers right now. You can watch this video again later to do the exercises. But I encourage you to do this exercise and to do it along with us today and to consider doing it on a daily or weekly basis. And I'll talk about how to apply this exercise in your own personal life, in your parenting, in your family life in a bit. But get out a pencil and paper if you can, or your smartphone or anything, and take some notes. So here we go. So the first question that I'm going to ask you is, what are your core values? What matters to you? Now, this is not an easy question to answer, so I have put up a list of core values on the slide here. This list is not a random list. It comes from research. Professor Shalom Schwartz in Israel did a worldwide study of universal human values and came up with this list. Now, the thing is that for some of us, we would look at this list and say, oh, I value all those things. All of those sound great. And it'd be very hard to narrow it down to 3. For others of us, we would say, oh, I don't know, and I don't know what to put down. So the challenge is often we think about what we should value, what other people want us to value, what we think the right answer should be. So as much as you can quell those voices, try to do that. Think about what you actually value. And this can be an iterative process, but write down 3 of them, 3 core values. Then, once you have 3 core values, my next challenge to you is going to be to ask yourself about your 3 key gifts or strengths. What are you good at? Not just what you're good at, but what are you good at that you enjoy doing? So there's a difference between can-do strengths and want-to strengths and skills. So what are the things that you can do well, that give you energy, that you find flow, that you feel like you're really using your unique gifts and talents? Now, here's a list that comes from one of my colleagues, Richard Leiter, who studies purpose and meaning in middle age and beyond. And he put together this list. He does a calling cards practice that is really terrific if you want to look him up. So this list is adapted from his work. So you can use this list, or you can come up with any of your own kinds of gifts and strengths that you want to put on. But list 3, again, things that you are good at and that you enjoy doing. The final question in my first iteration of this purpose statement exercise that I've done now for 7 years with thousands and thousands of people is to come up with the idea of who do you want to positively impact? Because research shows that purpose is not just an idea that you have in your own head. Purpose is pro-social. It's something that you do in real life outwardly that impacts other people. So what are 3 groups, individuals, causes, types of people that you want to make a positive impact on with your gifts and your skills? Who do you want to help? So list 3 of those. And you don't have to save the world today, but you do want to think outside, potentially outside your immediate household, and think about what kind of pro-social actions that you can make, because that also tends to boost our happiness. Acting in a pro-social way, doing good for others, actually makes us as individuals happier. Now, I used to end my little purpose statement exercise right there. But then, as happens in life, life happened. And I realized that my 3-pronged purpose statement just wasn't cutting it anymore. It wasn't cutting it for me. And I am a firm believer that if I have a problem, other people probably have that problem too. And so I need to address it on a global scale, not just internally. So I realized that what was getting in my way, what was holding me back from living my purpose, was all of my fears and anxieties. Whether I could, in fact, do all of these things, whether I could live out these values, whether I could make a difference in the lives of others in the way that I hoped that I could. And I put up this list of fears and anxieties and this list of yeah, buts, those ones where you say, I'd really like to do that, or yeah, that's a great idea, but I'm too old to do that. Or yeah, but I've got the mortgage payments and I can't rethink things right now. All of the yeah buts, all of the anxieties and fears that often stop us from making changes in our lives and from living on purpose, those are real. They are real for me, and I'd imagine they are real for you. So I've put up a list here, but this is one of the slides that always sort of makes me darkly laugh, because my bet is you don't need a slide to tell you what your fears and anxieties are. You know them all too well, but often we try to outrun them. We try to outrun our fears and anxieties, and we spend a lot of energy either pushing those fears and anxieties away, or just trying to suppress them and shove them under the rug. The problem is that they seep out sideways, and rather than trying to ignore them, we really need to kind of look at them and discuss them head on. Because if we try to outrun them or ignore our fears and anxieties, we spend a lot of energy doing that and not living on purpose. we also tend to not understand that those fears and anxieties will undermine our best attempts to live on purpose if we don't look at them. So write down 3 fears or anxieties that may hold you back on your path to purpose. And yes, you can limit it to 3, but you can switch it depending on the day. So the idea is not just to write those fears and anxieties down, but to see if we can take it a step further, to see if we can accept our fears and anxieties, to see if we can say, yes, these are the things that are holding me back from living my purpose. I'm going to look at them and I'm going to work with them rather than shoving them under the rug. And then once we do that, and by the way, that's no easy feat, but we're just going to move on for now and I'll get back to it. The final piece of this Mad Lib style purpose statement is to ask yourself, what are 3 purpose-based commitments? What are 3 goals? What are 3 things that you can do right now to live out your purpose? So how can you live this purpose statement right now? So this is where things go from being more abstract to being fairly concrete, to actually putting your actions where your ideas are, right? To not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. Now, I can tell you that this is where things get a little bit scary. And this is one of my favorite slides that I use all the time in my talks, because I have anthropomorphized this fish to death. I don't know about you, but I really relate to this fish. So this fish is jumping from a small pond to a bigger pond. And if I was the fish, I would be saying, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, I'm not going to make it. I'm terrified. And we kind of wonder why the fish is making this big leap. Now, the fish may be pushed by pain. The water may be too salty, or the water may be too hot, or even the fish may be pulled by possibilities. That looks like a nicer, bigger, more fabulous bowl of water to be in. But either way, the fish has decided to make the change, and my bet is that fish is terrified. I will also tell you that I have been that fish, and I would imagine you have been that fish too. We have had to make changes in our lives that have been scary to us. So what do you do when you are that fish? Well, first of all, there are a lot of fears and anxieties that come along for the ride. And this is where I embrace this wonderful exercise from acceptance and commitment therapy called Monsters on the Bus. And the Monsters on the Bus exercise goes like this. All right, so you are driving your bus down your path to purpose, okay? And you're driving along and everything is fine. You're going toward your goals, but all of a sudden, monsters jump out everywhere. They are in front of you and behind you and over you and under you and to the left and the right. And you have to put the brakes on and screech to a halt. You cannot move your bus forward because these monsters are everywhere. These monsters are your fears and anxieties. All right. And when you are midair like this fish, those fears and anxieties jump out. So what do? You can't go forward or backwards or left or right. The monsters are right there. They're climbing all over your bus. The fears and anxieties have stopped you in your tracks. So acceptance and commitment therapy advises that you put your bus in park, take a deep breath, and open the door of your bus and look at those fears and anxieties one by one, name them, and invite them on board the bus. Then tell them to go sit down and shut up because you are driving your bus toward a better future. Now, this is a wonderful exercise. It also oversimplifies how very difficult it is to accept your fears and anxieties and move forward on purpose. But it's a good sort of way of thinking about it. And so, yes, I am mixing a metaphor of a bus and a fish, but work with me here. We're just going to imagine that this fish is jumping from a bigger tank, one tank to a bigger tank. And on the way, it's confronting all of its fishy monsters. It's opening up its bus and saying, come on in, I can do this. And I am going to move forward on purpose. All right. So let's say you have your values, your 3 core values. You have your 3 strengths. You have your 3 impact groups or types of people or causes that you want to impact. You have your 3 fears or anxieties that hold you back. And you are working on 3 purpose-based commitments, 3 action steps that you can take to live things out. So you have 5 groups of 3 things. All right. Now is the time to put it all together, Mad Libs style. And this is what I put together when I put together my Mad Libs purpose statement for today, my pandemic purpose statement for October 17th, 2020. So because I value, and then I listed my values of relationships, perseverance, and creativity, I will use my gifts for translating research, making connections, and organization to positively impact the lives of my children, my students, and the broader public. I accept my fears and anxieties about not being perfect enough, not being helpful enough, or fear for the future, and still today make conscious purpose-based commitments to, and wait for it because these are not going to be as earth-shattering as you think they potentially should be, but I'm going to explain why. Make a fun baked potato bar tonight. Take a bike ride with the kids and check in with my students. Now, this is my pandemic purpose statement for today. I encourage all of you to ask those 5 questions of yourself. What do I value? What are my gifts and strengths? What am I good at? Who do I want to positively impact? What might hold me back? What are those fears and anxieties? And what commitments do I want to make today? You can do this on a daily basis. You can do this as a family. You can do this on a weekly basis as a family. You can encourage your undergraduate students. You can encourage, in fact, I've done this with 2nd graders. You can encourage all of your kids to do this as a way of thinking about what matters and how you can make it happen on a very practical level. Now, you might think that my purpose-based commitments should be bigger or bolder. But the thing is, I am living my purpose when I make a fun baked potato bar night with my kids, because I value the creativity of cooking. I value the relationships. Well, it doesn't take a lot of perseverance. The bacon goes away really fast. But I try to go out and about with the kids. I check in with my students as much as I can. These are all small things that I can do that make me feel meaningful and purposeful in a time of uncertainty. So I encourage you to put together one of these yourself. I will send out a link, but it's also on my website, and it's also on the School of Human Ecology website, a version of this pandemic purpose statement. You can download it for free on my website, christinewhelan.com. You can download it off the university website. And this is and you print it out, you can fill it out on a day-to-day basis, a weekly basis with your family, alone. I would really encourage you to do a purpose statement and to think about it. Not these don't have to be huge things, but just to figure out what matters to you, because often our days go by in this fog of, my new favorite word is acedia. Acedia is this word that means that sort of boredom and anxiety, this sort of odd feeling of you're both anxious and you don't really know what to do with yourself. And you're also listless at the same time because you've been cooped up in social isolation too long. So making a purpose statement is a way to combat that. I would also encourage you to do a time diary. And a time diary is sort of like being an attorney for your life, where for an entire week, and this is not particularly fun, but I can tell you it's incredibly useful. You write down what you do in 15-minute increments. You bill your time out. You can do it on a spreadsheet, you can do it on a piece of paper. But the idea is at the end to figure out where your time goes during the week. And it's really eye-opening because it's hard to make changes until you know what you're actually doing now. And often we are doing something very different than what we think we're doing with our time. And then also to be really compassionate with yourself, as compassionate as you can be. There are wonderful meditation programs and apps. My partner and fellow School of Human Ecology, Professor Charles Raison, works on some cognitively based compassion training research. And there's really wonderful research going on there about creating a daily practice. But I want to end with a poem. And then I want to leave time for questions here. So this poem is from Catherine McKenna, and I just think it's so beautiful. She says, "Now every time I witness a strong person, I want to know, what dark did you conquer in your story? Mountains do not rise without earthquakes." And because it's me, I always like to enhance things a little bit for my own purposes. So I'm proposing some edits. What dark maybe could you accept in your story? What dark might you integrate in your story? And potentially, what dark could you even embrace in your story? Right now, for many of us, we are in a time of huge earthquakes, and there are lots of challenging things going on. But we have all seen strong people who rise up, and we want to be those people. So how can we create mountains out of these earthquakes? By thinking about our purpose and meaning, not in an abstract sense, but in a really, really practical way. So that's what I'm doing with your children as my students, and that is what I encourage all of you to do in your own life as well. So if you want to download your pandemic worksheet, your daily pandemic purpose worksheet, you can do that on my website. And one of the books that I assign in my class is a book that I wrote for young adults about finding your purpose in life, called The Big Picture: A Guide to Finding Your Purpose in Life, that has lots of these exercises and more about really thinking about those questions of what matters most to me, why does it matter, and how to make it happen. But the idea of considering your purpose is not just for one person at one stage of life, but for all of us at all stages of life. So you are on this journey as well, on your own and with your young adult children. And I'm honored to teach them, and excited to take some questions from you as well. I'm seeing questions pop up into the chat too. Oh, I'm seeing some great questions popping up into the chat. How can students who are really busy with school and worrying about the pandemic make time for a reflection like this? Great question. So I think this pandemic purpose statement can be done in like 3 to 5 minutes in the morning. You can put it as the lock screen on your phone. You could put it right up on your computer. You can create a small group where you would text it to each other in the morning or on Monday and say, this is your pandemic purpose statement for the week. You guys can do it as a family. This shouldn't take too long. And it is a really nice way of reflecting on what matters and then making some really specific purpose-based commitments. Now, those purpose-based commitments, they do need to be specific and concrete so you know whether you've done them or not. If you put like, I want to save the world, that's great. I applaud you, but that's going to be hard to accomplish in a day or a week. And it's also going to be hard to know whether you've even made any progress toward it. So as specific and measurable and actionable as possible is good for these goals. Let's see, you also have, what advice do you have for my daughter who is halfway through her college experience and realizing that her major is not her passion or purpose? Should she start over? Yes, back in the pre-COVID days, this was a great question that I got a lot. Students would come to my office and ask me this a lot. And so I really believe in taking things and breaking them down into their parts, into the skills, the ideas, the values behind them, and not just the label for the thing itself. So for example, somebody who is majoring in consumer science and retail behavior, they may be interested in consumer psychology. And really, they may be interested in how people think about what to do with their limited resources. And they may say, gosh, consumer science maybe isn't the right place for me, but I want to pursue a career in psychology. And so what I tend to do, especially if students are late on and pretty close to graduating, I encourage everybody to break their major down into the core building block elements. You may not have to change your major. In fact, really what you may want to do is apply to a job or a program in a different field and tell them why the skills that you learned in your major are really compatible with what that employer or that graduate program is doing. And I can tell you from experience, people love to have folks from different methodological research backgrounds in their organizations, because it brings new perspectives. So rather than thinking about a major just by its title alone, think about what builds success within that and how those building blocks can be applied elsewhere. Let's see. I'm wondering about the list of fears and anxiety. Having poverty on that list. Can I explain? So yes, I mean, people, the fear of not having enough is a really big one, and it is a real one right now for so many families. And for so many students, especially the students that are coming to me saying that they are saddled with debt and they are trying to go out into the world and they don't know whether they're going to be able to get a job in this very difficult economy. So these fears are real. Now, one of the things that I always say, though, is that we have this really misguided idea that you can either work for a purpose or you can work for a paycheck, but you can't work for both. And that's not true. It is a real purpose to be able to work to support your family. Working to support your family is purposeful. And within every job, you can engage in job crafting and other things that are ways to help you find purpose in whatever you are doing. So there is no one job or one career or one calling that is purposeful, but rather it is looking at all that work in a way that you find what is meaningful in it. And so this is where those bricklayers are laying the bricks, right? They're all doing the same thing, but the bricklayer with the purpose and the calling sees the larger why behind what they are doing. So yes, you can get a paycheck, and especially when the times are really challenging, that paycheck in itself can be very purposeful. How have you seen people engaging in pro-social behaviors during the pandemic? Oh, have they increased or decreased? I have really struggled with this because being pro-social by its nature involves, being with other people and and we tend to equate that with face-to-face contact. There are several great ways you can be pro-social. So one of the things you can do is you can check on loved ones. You can check on neighbors. You can call people. Early on in the pandemic, when we were seriously freaked out about what was going to happen next, one of the wonderful things that I saw happening was that friends and family who I hadn't connected with in a long time reached out to me, and I reached out to others. And I had conversations, long overdue conversations. That is pro-social behavior. So reach out to the people that you want to reach out to. Reach out to the people that you're thinking about. That can be really pro-social, and you can be just by phone. But phone, I think, is better than email or text because having that human connection as much as we can is very useful. The other pro-social things we can do is know that even though we are struggling, there are others who are struggling too, and struggling more than we are. So donating to causes that are meaningful to us, volunteering in some way, thinking about how we can be the change we want to see in the world. There's a wonderful course being offered right now at UW on purpose and protest and political action. And really that crosses all party lines. And the idea is to stand up for what you believe in. In my Consuming Happiness course, not this week, but next week, I'm going to be talking about the role of public happiness and political expression leading up to the election. This idea of what is the good life and how can we go out there and try to make that good life publicly for others. So rather than just turning internally for our own individual happiness, how can we figure out what we believe the good life is and help make it a reality both for ourselves and for others? Let's see. How often should our purpose statements change as we move through life? And is there anything that we as parents can do to help our children find their purpose if they're feeling discouraged, lost, or overwhelmed? Well, first of all, if they're feeling discouraged, lost, and overwhelmed, join the club. This is a really hard time. And I think you all probably know this as parents of young adults, but this is an incredibly hard time for college students, for young adults in particular. I mean, we have, the society has victimized them and blamed them for so much of the pandemic. And it's deeply unfair because college students are trying to trying to find themselves and live their lives as best they can, and grow and learn and form social bonds and social networks that are incredibly important to the rest of their lives in a time of real uncertainty and difficulty. So yes, it is discouraging and it is very difficult. So I think the first thing is to make sure that your young adult, and you, by the way, because you may be feeling this too, know that you're not alone, and to reach out to other people and talk about it. I've been talking about it nonstop, and I try to talk about it with the students as well. Um, and in terms of having your purpose change, I think your purpose can change as much as you need it to change. So your values tend to be kind of consistent over the course of your life, your real values. It's just that it takes us a long time to try to figure out what our real values are. And when students come into my office and say, oh, I love what you do, I want to do this when I grow up, how can I be, how can I do this? I tell them honestly that when I was sitting in their seat, I had no idea what I wanted to do or what my purpose was. But now looking back, I can see that I was always interested in the same things. So retrospectively, I can see that the same values and gifts were used throughout the whole course of my career to date. But at the time, I didn't know it. So I tried new things. I tried things out. I said, one of the things I always tell my students is to say yes to experiences as much as possible. Say yes to opportunities, test things out. You can always change your mind, and to really push yourself and do some explorations. Now, this is harder than it was before, right? This is harder advice to actually execute in a time when students can't go overseas as much, when it's taking a job and an internship does not have the same kind of social interaction that it might have before. But getting out there and trying new things, and also knowing that this is a very difficult time, and if it has to be for later, know that you can really take action on a lot of these things as the world opens up, hopefully in the future. Let's see. Oh, how do we encourage our students to be patient and kind with themselves? And how do I remain positive in the light of and in the light of struggle in front of my student without sugarcoating what I may be going through? Oof, these are excellent questions. For young adults, I have always taken the tact that sort of calling it like it is and being real is much more important than sugarcoating things, right? It's much more helpful, right? Because college students have some good BS detection by that time, right? They know when we're not telling the truth. My young children know, and they say, "Mommy, why are you upset?" When I'm trying to put on a happy face on things. And so it's really just better to be honest and to say, I'm really struggling with anxiety. It sounds like you might be too. Can we talk about it? You as parents don't have to be perfect for your students to be happy. Right. So having some real conversations about this is useful. And quite frankly, having this pandemic purpose worksheet could be a nice jumping off point for it. I also see a question about my book, The Big Picture. It is geared toward college students. It is geared toward young adults, 18 to 25-ish. I have plenty of friends who are my age in their mid-40s who are reading this book as well, and find it very useful, because really we need to all ask these questions at various points. If you are looking for a book on purpose for older folks, Richard Leiter writes lots of books on the power of purpose, and all sorts of purpose books for people heading into retirement, and things like that. But until I wrote The Big Picture, there was really very little that was geared toward that 18 to 25 cohort, because the incorrect assumption was that you had to live a long time before you could ask these questions of meaning and purpose. And I said, are you kidding me? Why don't we ask them from the start, so that we make all of life's most pivotal decisions, which happen in your 20s and 30s, right? If we make those decisions on purpose. And so that's what I try to do in the book. But these are really tough times, and I would encourage you as parents to encourage your students to reach out to professors even during their virtual office hours. I'm holding virtual office hours, and I have to tell you, it has been one of the real bright spots of teaching this semester, because it's in those virtual office hours. I encourage students to just come in, if they're quarantined or whatever, and they're bored, just to come in and chat with me. And that is a way of, getting some real talk from another adult. What's been my favorite part of teaching so many students about finding their purpose? And what impact has it had on my life personally? Well, so I love this question because my purpose is teaching, and I love it. I love working with students. I love hearing their stories, and I love following their careers. I am friends with so many of my old students. And one of my old students who just graduated last year, I had her both as a freshman, and then I also had her as a senior in my class, and we kept in touch. And then she called me and she said, "Can I just ask you a quick question? I remember something from class. I have to give a big presentation to my boss. And can I work, can you help me?" And I'm sending her the links. And so, it's these relationships that are really meaningful to me, because I had wonderful mentors and professors myself. And so, nobody comes to any of this alone, and that support is hugely important. In terms of how it has impacted my personal life, wow. So I started this purpose research at a time of real difficulty in my life. I had some family tragedy, and so that was the big picture kind of came out of that. And I felt like I had kind of wrestled with it, and the purpose was really good, and all was good there. And then my marriage dissolved, and I went through another incredibly awful period in my life, where I realized that my first part of the purpose statement, looking at the values and the gifts and the impact groups, that's where my purpose statement had ended. And I realized that wasn't enough, and that I wasn't finding it as useful as I needed to find it. And so I added to it. So I have always used my personal experiences with this research as a kind of litmus test for, does it work? And can it work? And my students have been incredible guides back to me, because they will say things like, I tried this exercise and it didn't work this way, but then I made an edit and I did it this way, and this worked for me. Well, in that case, I incorporate their edits in the next draft of my work. So it is really an iterative process. And as I say in the big picture, it's kind of co-written with thousands of students along the way. Are your classes open to every major, or are they only SOHI classes? Yes, so they are open to anybody in any major, and I'm teaching Consuming Happiness in the spring, and it is open, and it's going to be an online class again, unfortunately, because it's a big class. So it'll be online in the spring, but then next year I am hoping to expand it even further, and maybe hoping to do it both in person and online, so we can get it to more students. And how has my research changed as the pandemic has occurred? Whew, a lot. But I have to tell you, it has pulled it into focus and made it. I don't know. It's given me more energy to test it out, because when I feel that feeling of acedia, that loss of purpose, when I feel that feeling of overwhelm, I will try some of my own exercises and tweak them and see what works for me and what doesn't, and then bring that back to my students. And so I hope that my students are enjoying it this semester. And I'm in fact going to be reading their big picture reflection papers about how they applied these ideas in their own life. And as a final project, we're going to be putting together a pandemic sort of time capsule, where they're going to look at all of their musings and research on well-being and happiness during this period. And I'm hopefully going to be getting it back to them in 1 year and 5 years, so that they can have a record of this crazy time in their lives and how this formed their sense of purpose and meaning. Let's see. Any recommendations for parents who are struggling to connect with their children once they went away to college? I want to check in and make sure they're okay, but I don't want to be over-attached or clingy. Oh man, this is a question that will go on forever. I mean, I feel that way about my younger kids too. I was just asking my fourth graders teacher that. I mean, we're, as parents, we're always trying to learn, where's that line between freedom, letting them fail just enough, letting them spread their wings. I would say setting up some regular communication is important, and if you can see them with your own eyes, I find that helps. So, so even if you can't physically be with them right now, this is where Zoom or Skype or other visual media can help, because you as a parent will look at your child and know whether there's a problem. Like you'll know and you'll be able to check in. This is also where, by the way, the university can help. Like if you're worried about your child, you can encourage your child to seek out support. In every department, there are folks who are, in every school, there are folks who are there to help students manage the academic and psychosocial elements of this really difficult time. And I know that I check in with my students, and so do many other professors that I know. Has the pandemic had any positive impacts on helping us all find our purpose? More time for self-reflection, more time for connecting and reaching out virtually. Yeah, so the thing is, and I'm always sort of cautious to say this because I know it comes from a place of incredible privilege. When the pandemic hit, I began doing my work from home virtually because I was able to do it that way. Now, all the people who are first responders and essential workers who cannot do work from home, that this does not apply, and that's really unfortunate, because these are the folks who are like keeping our whole system running. Folks from grocery stores to all the hospital workers, all these folks are keeping our system running. My role then was to stay at home and to connect as virtually as best I can. So I did all these summer classes this summer to learn how to create better online videos, to learn how to teach better online. And so for me personally, it has been a real educational experience, because I've thrown myself into trying to figure out how to better connect with students and to learn. So as a teacher, I'm also a learner. Personally, though, it's been really great because I see my kids a lot more. I am home with my family for dinner every night because I'm not really ever leaving my home, and so that has personally had some wonderful benefits as well. But in terms of finding our purpose, it was around probably July in the pandemic timeline that a lot of my friends came to me and said, I'm thinking of just leaving my career in medicine, in law, as a professor. I found through the pandemic that none of this is meaningful to me. I just need to do something entirely different. And I gave the advice that one gives everybody after a death or a loss or any traumatic event, which is to breathe, to think, to not change anything yet, and just take it slow. So we are still in the throes of this pandemic. It's not over yet. It very well may get a whole lot worse. So I'd say no rash decisions around purpose, but do think about it and come up with these ideas, and then test things out in small bits, in small ways of putting yourself out there. So that's what I'm trying to do, and I'm testing out all sorts of various new apps and to-do list programs and ways of organizing my time. Oh, I see a wonderful question about general tips on working from home and avoiding burnout. I've been feeling overwhelmed and like I'm just going through the motions, and would like to start making my days more purposeful with intention. I just read an interesting article about this just this morning that interviewed one of my sort of colleagues in the behavior change world. Nir Eyal is his name. Nir is his first name, and then Eyal, I believe, is how you spell his last name. And he wrote about how he hates to-do lists because it gives you, it sort of makes you just think that you have to keep crossing things off. Whereas instead he blocks his time so that he knows he's doing the things that are most important, because he's not letting things that are less important take up more of his time. So I thought I might kind of give that a try, because I actually love to-do lists as a way of keeping me focused and organized. But his argument is that perhaps that's not focusing you on the more purposeful things. I also, by the way, recommend a book by John Zeratsky, who is a graduate of the UW Consumer Science Department, and he's the author of Make Time. And it is a book about making time for what matters in your life. And he and I have done a lot of work together. In fact, this coming week in Consuming Happiness, my students are reading his book. And it's about coming up with a focus for the week, a focus for the day, and really lasering yourself in on that focus as a way to not just kind of go through the motions. But I can tell you, I feel burned out too. I was just saying to Brooke, one of my students who introduced me, I was just telling her that it is really hard to stare into a ring light and a little green light while I teach all the time and try to be perky, and it's really kind of soul destroying at times. However, I know that this is purposeful work and it's difficult for everybody. And so we're really that cheesy line of we're all in it together, at least within UW and the School of Human Ecology. I really do believe we are all in it together, and we're all working to support the students. And quite frankly, the interaction with the students is supporting us. So, how would you see best to take time to focus on myself while also having a large family that needs my practices and intention? Any tips that when you don't have much time in your day alone? Okay, you have a large family. Caring for your family is purposeful work. It is purposeful work. I don't know how large your family is, but with a 5, 7, and 9-year-old, I feel like I kind of have a brood myself going here. And that's why making a baked potato bar is on my purpose statement list, because that is purposeful, and that brings joy in our family life. So I would think about the things that you do rather than about the things that are left undone. So create a done list rather than a to-do list, right? Think about your accomplishments in a day, and be grateful to yourself, and give yourself some compassion and cut yourself some slack for what you are accomplishing. Now, in terms of taking time alone, I don't know. There have been, depends on what the ages of your kids are, whether you can at least go for a walk around the block alone. I have done sort of nice sort of device-free walking meditation kind of things. Or if I'm leaving my kids at home alone, I have my cell phone and the home phone line, and you can keep it open. If I just walk around the block, I feel like it's probably okay. You know, all these kinds of things that you can try to do to get a little bit of alone time. But it is hard. People talk about social isolation, and then there are those of us with large families who think a little social isolation would sound lovely right now. So, you know, it's different across the platform. My favorite meditations and favorite app recommendations. Well, let's see. So if you want to try meditating, the Calm app is incredibly popular, and for good reason. There is the Sanvello app that is doing coaching and sort of cognitive behavioral therapy change. That's quite useful and may be covered by some of your insurance as well, which is kind of nice. In addition, for a spiritual practice, I myself personally am Catholic, and so I use the Halo app for some spiritual meditation when gathering in a faith community is difficult. And in terms of productivity, I find anything that reminds me of my progress to be really useful. So I use my Apple Watch to keep myself on track and moving. Any app that works for you, that does sort of small steps. There's an app called The Fabulous, which I have just begun using as well, that sort of takes you into small steps things. There are so many of them out there. I would just experiment. I would experiment with them, and most of them have free trials, so you can try them for a little bit and then cancel if they don't work for you. Any recommendations as the weather gets colder for our students to remain active and engaged? Yes, get outside. As the joke goes, there is no such thing as bad weather, just bad choices in clothing. Get outside. For my part, I have purchased snowshoes for my family. We're going to go outside. It's not going to matter. I will put Vaseline on the kids' faces and out we go. I have tried to make a pact to take a morning walk every morning to get outside. And that's important. You know, the seasonal affective disorder comes from not having enough sunlight in your eyes and being exposed to it. Even on a cloudy day, there is more sun outside than there is in your child's dorm room or in your own house. So get out there and walk and stay as active as possible. I see several of my students who are chiming into my happy hours, as I call them, my small group discussions, and some of my synchronous lectures on their phones as they are sitting outside, and I applaud that. So anyway, I wanted to say thank you so much to everybody for joining for these excellent questions. I hope this is useful to you. And here's to pandemic purpose and to finding meaning even in these really difficult times. So all the best on Wisconsin, and here's to your next big thing.